My advisee, when I was just starting out at Stanford, taught me how to advise. What do I mean by that? Well, I really had no idea how to advise. I'm still learning how to advise. Mentoring is, in my view, the most difficult thing that a faculty member does. It's like mentoring is this hard, teaching is this hard, and research is like below the frame, I would say. And I'll talk about this in another tutorial about why mentoring is both so amazingly rewarding but so profoundly challenging. But that'll be a different issue. I remember I was having a conversation with this advisee, and I'm basically making it up as I go along to like how to give advice in a constructive way. And I thought that I would try to motivate them by comparing them. I referenced something, I don't remember what it was anymore, that one of their colleagues, one of their peers, was doing, and was basically kind of almost conveying it as a benchmark or a source of inspiration. But I bet there was an undertone of like, why can't you be like your sibling kind of vibe to it? Not proud of it, but I bet that vibe was there, whether intended or not. And I remember like it was yesterday, my advisee sort of pausing and saying, and here I'm paraphrasing, that doesn't help me. Said it in a really direct, but also kind of understanding and sort of compassionate way. It was the roles were switched. She was now advising me and said, like, that doesn't help me. I am not motivated by that. Basically, that doesn't work for me. And so the message was like, please don't use that method of trying to encourage me. Like, don't use it again. And I remember distinctly feeling, and I think I just blurted it. I was like, oh, like, I'm sorry, and done. Like, you'll never hear me use that method again. I'm not committed to it. It's just sort of like, improvised. It's not like part of my teaching philosophy or mentoring philosophy. It was sort of just something that spilled out. And, maybe I had heard it. Maybe I'd been on the receiving end of something like that. I have no idea where it came from. The key aspect of this is, had my advisee not had the profound sense of self-awareness to just say that to me, and I guess trust, I guess we had established some sense of trust, which is good by that point, and definitely over the course of our careers together, I would have probably kept doing it. It's sort of like evolution is not about some new mutation that has benefit. It's a mutation that has no effect. Those are allowed to stay around too. So I might have mutated and started comparing my student as a way of motivating them, thinking that it was helpful. And if my advisee had not said a word, I might have continued doing that. And I might have kept doing that until, I don't know, I read it in the literature, or a colleague told me, or I read it on, NPR that the worst thing you can possibly do is X, Y, or Z. I might have kept going. And the key of this tutorial is that advisees are the ones who teach advisors how to advise. That sounds like it's a cop-out. It sounds like it's like, well, so it's our job? That seems unfair. We've got a lot of things on our plate, and now it's our job to advise you how to advise us. And that's not the point of this. But there is a tiny element of that, and I hope you'll stick with me to the end. And I guess I do have to talk about the sort of, in my view, the hierarchy of complexity and reward and rewardfulness, I don't know, of the different components of academia. Like if we just think about just three of them, that's not exhaustive, but mentoring, teaching, research. Let's take teaching. Teaching, your students change every single year, and then every few years, they undergo something at a collective level, like a generational shift that completely changes a whole set of variables, a whole set of reference points and assumptions and vocabularies. And you can feel it when they walk into the room that next year. And you can feel that things are different. And yet your slides are the same and your lecture notes are the same, but you have to change somehow. Your metaphors don't work as well, or maybe some that didn't work do. And anyway, it's this constantly moving generational target. But at the end of the day, teaching, as hard as it is something that often has certain kinds of benchmarks, like ID quizzes, or if you're in, I don't know, computer science, you like either Pong works or it doesn't. There's various things that generational changes or not, you have some kind of anchor, which is the curriculum that is preordained. Like Chiang Kai-shek was born and died same years, and the Long March happened the same years, no matter if someone was born in 1981 versus 91 versus 2001. And so much of our introductory course material has to do, at least at the lecture portion, with these sorts of dimensions. That's not all of teaching, of course, but it's a portion of it. Advising, mentoring, there is no curriculum. I mean, of course, your advisees take your classes, but what I'm talking about are the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations that happen in your office or over Zoom or whatever it might be about their research, about their career, about what they're doing, about the other courses they're taking, about their lives, about their job search, about what everything and everything. And you're dealing with an N of one. There is nobody else in the world like them, even when they remind you of other people, even when you think, wow, this person is just like so-and-so or reminds me of so-and-so. And then you have to remind yourself, they're not. They're like completely not, 100% not. And so it's more along the lines of a kind of therapy in the sense that you have to work entirely with what is inside and going on dynamically within your advisee. But you don't know what that is. Often they don't know what that is. The list goes on and on and on and on. You can imagine when you start thinking of it in that way, you should understand that there is no formula for mentoring. There is no recipe. That doesn't mean, though, that we don't fall into the habit of trying to use recipes or use formulas or use advice that worked again before again. We're human. We have to economize life. We have to. Otherwise, we would spin it. Anyway. And so that brings me back to this attempted advice that maybe I had internalized from someone else of trying to motivate by way of comparison. And again, back to the story of my advisee saying, it doesn't work for me. Like, I know myself. I understand the idea behind what you're saying. It doesn't work for me. We've got to find a different technique. And so from that moment, I realized what mentoring was, which is, it is my job to motivate. It is my job to guide. It is my job to give advice. I'm an advisor, but I have to give it in a way that is somehow tuned to the exact individual person with whom I'm going to have this 5, 6, 10, 20, 30-year mentoring relationship. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm an advisee until I'm dead. Like our advisee relationship goes on until we're gone. I still ask my advisor for letters of recommendation and for advice. I still have people ask me for advice who are now going up for tenure. One thing that you do need to do for yourself as the advisee, and I'm sorry, you do have responsibility here, is to try to know what it is that works for you, trust your own instinct, listen to what's going on inside as you're receiving advice, as you're conversing with more senior colleagues, with your advisor, and really try to pay attention to what is and is not working for you. And that sounds like, oh, I can do that. That's easy. That's extremely hard, because even though your advisor, their job is just to help you. That's why professionally they were put on earth, and as far as you're concerned, it can still feel really intimidating to be in their presence, and like you want to impress them and you want them to think you're smart or like worth their time or all of these different things, all of these anxieties. And when you have anxiety, it's hard to listen to that internal voice. The other thing that we can often do as advisees is to blame ourselves or think that the fault is ours, meaning my student who said this to me could have interpreted it as, I felt a twang of, I don't know, like a not a good feeling in my chest when Mulaney said that. But I guess that's just how it is. Like, it's like, I guess that's the pain of the no pain, no gain. And I guess that's just part of the process. When of course it's not. It was totally like a shot in the dark kind of piece of advice. But this person had the self-awareness to say, no. This is not just like, a difficult thing I need to go through. And I'm sure there will be those, but this is not one of those. And so I'm going to go ahead and say it, which brings us to the third part, the most awkward part, the most challenging part, and the one that as much as I wish it weren't something you had to think about, I think it is communicating that, is saying that doesn't work, or this would really be helpful. You can also put it in positive terms, like what has tended to work for me in the past is this, or what often doesn't work for me is this. And if your advisor is like everyone that I've ever known among my colleagues, they will be receptive to this. They will be positive about it. They will be thankful that they are getting advice on how to advise you, because it serves no one for us to sort of miss each other, or worse, do damage. Self-awareness, not assuming that it's just the pain of the process, and 3, the most awkward part, is finding a way to communicate it, are going to go a long way to establishing a relationship that is going to last for a very long time. That's going to last for a very long time, and ideally will be as balanced and healthy and productive as possible. There'll be rocky parts. The other person's human as well. It won't always align. Sometimes it goes completely south, but I think that's rare. At the early stages, I think is a really good time to be able to communicate this. I would just ask, being on that opposite side, is to communicate with compassion and realize that the person on the opposite side of that conversation is really just there trying to help. And so if they make a misstep, or if they, if they motivate by comparison and it like doesn't sit right, that all that needs to be said is that doesn't really work well for me. Can we try something else? That's as much as needs to be said. It's just knowing that there is a person who on the other end of that who is human, that is trying to do a better job. And I think very, very gratefully to not only that my advisee told me this so many years ago, but also the way they said it. It was just matter of fact, but with a lot of compassion. I still think about it probably on a monthly basis, and it's totally reshaped the way I advise every student therefrom. So in a weird way, this first advisee not only advised me, but then ended up indirectly advising every single one of my advisees from that point on. And I'd like to think that I have never forgotten that lesson. I'm not a perfect advisor, but at least I've never forgotten that particular lesson from that moment. So difficult to think about, but I invite you to think about it. How could you, in whatever small way, advise your advisor to advise you the way you need to get the most out of your program? I'll see you in the next tutorial.